The greatest thing in Michigan is to know that your name is written there. Isn't that true? So good to be with you this morning and to share the word while Carrie is out of town. I never wish for him to go out of town often, but secretly. Okay. No, I look forward to every opportunity that I get to be able to fill in and to encourage you. I want to add to our scripture reading this morning, if I can, a passage found in John chapter 17, and just two verses there, verse 4 and 5, and it'll show all of us that Jesus understood the power and the significant effect there is behind having a spiritual purpose. And so he says in John 17, verse 4 and 5, I glorified you on the earth by finishing the work that you gave me to do. So now, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had in your presence before the world existed. George Washington Carver wrote something I thought was really powerful a long time ago. He says, no individual has the right to come into the world and go out of it without leaving behind him distinct and legitimate reasons for having passed through it. When you and I read and study our Bible, you guys have seen some of the same accounts that I have, how that we have example after example after example of men and women who had a spiritual purpose. Noah, he was able to build that ark in spite of all the ridicule and all the scoffing because he had a purpose. Abraham was willing to leave friends and family and go to a new land because he had a purpose. Joseph was able to endure persecution and imprisonment because he had a purpose. You know, Moses was able to leave the riches and the palace of Pharaoh because he had a purpose. David could confront Goliath and ask, is there not a cause? Because he had a purpose. Daniel could stand real tall in that lion's den because he had a purpose. John, the one they referred to as the baptizer, was willing to say, Jesus must increase and I must decrease because he had a purpose. Stephen was able to stand with a message regardless if it was going to cost him his life, and it did because he had a purpose. Paul was able to withstand difficulty and persecution because he had a purpose. And Jesus himself, in the sovereign plan of God, could withstand the cruel death on that Roman cross on Calvary because he had a purpose. When you and I put Christ on in baptism, and for some of us, we got to go way back in our memory bank, our life changed dramatically. Because from that point on, you and I were going to be growing men and women. We were going to be learning. We were going to be disciples of Jesus. We were going to learn and grow and develop. And that never stops, by the way, at least not until you're 70. It might go beyond that. We don't know. But recently, as I was reading in my Bible, I came to the end of the book of Matthew again. And there in chapter 28, on that occasion when Jesus meets with his apostles before he ascends back up into heaven, that we sang about just a moment ago, that we believe that to be true, he met with them and he said two really interesting things there at the end of that chapter. He says, when they saw him, they worshiped him. There's one. But some doubted. Now that jumped out at me when I was reading that particular passage because I thought, wow, Jesus saw this worship. Jesus saw these doubts. He saw how fearful they were. He saw the anxiety that was going on in their lives and the questions that were racing through their head. And they realized that Jesus was going to leave them and they were going to be left without him. And he saw everything that went on that moment, and immediately, right on the top of that, on top of all that doubting and fear, which made them a whole lot like us, Jesus gave them the Great Commission. And he said to them, go. And you guys know what he told them to do. Teach, baptize, and teach all things that they have observed. He gave them a purpose. They had a spiritual purpose to their life. And when you and I look at us and we see all of our fears and our doubtings and our struggles and all of that, on top of that, we need to all think about having a spiritual purpose. You know, there are a lot of values of having a spiritual purpose that I don't think I was taught when I first became a Christian, because I was still wrestling with learning what I had done and accepting God's forgiveness. But as I grew older, I saw the necessity of you and I having time where we stop and say, what is my spiritual purpose or purposes to my life? One of the things that purpose will do, it'll help motivate you. Anybody ever need motivation? Okay, I'm not alone. I'm in the right crowd. You know, every once in a while, the motivation level kind of gets low, and I just need to be motivated. And when you and I have a purpose, it motivates us, because a great purpose in life works on us. It does a couple things. First of all, we work on the purpose. And secondly, the purpose works on us. And so as a result of that, sometimes we don't even know what we're doing, whether we're working on the goal, the dream, what it is we want to do, or is that goal working on us as individuals? See, that's what makes this thing so beautiful. That's what makes having a spiritual purpose so real and so important. There's something about a purpose or a goal that motivates us. And if you don't believe me, next time you go to the bowling alley, okay, do this for me. Tell the manager, just to remove all the pins. You want nothing at the end of the alley. And you get up and you roll the ball, and thud, it hits the back of the alley. And it comes back to you, and you pick it up and you throw it again. Thud, Now you say, Tom, wait a minute, that's no fun. But what's the purpose of that? And that's my whole point. You could tell the manager, I'm just here for fun and fellowship. But you do that a few times and it's like, no, this is not what bowling is all about. Because it needs a purpose. It needs those pins up there so that when you're hitting those, that motivates you, because you get instant feedback. Like, how well did I do? Did I do well or did I not do well? And if you slip one in the gutter, you kind of want to hide and hope the next person gets up right away. That's what makes bowling that different, okay? The purpose tends to motivate us and to keep us focused, but it'll also help us prioritize our lives and keep our priorities straight. There's something about a purpose that keeps things in perspective on what's important and what's not so important. It's that purpose. If we focus on it, if we take a moment and look at it, it has this tendency to prioritize everything for us, right? Somebody says that when we forget the ultimate, we become a slave to the immediate. And boy, isn't that true. I heard a missionary give a report one time, and you guys have probably all heard missionary reports. And I couldn't help when I was listening to him to realize that he had a very strong spiritual purpose. He was not there just to raise more funds, but to explain to the folks, how the money had been given and where the money was going and where the effort in that work had been expended, in the place where he was working. And so he was prioritizing, and he was showing what his spiritual purpose was doing in his life. Everybody has a tendency to add too many things to their life. Okay, you guys have already gone to sleep on me. How can I talk about a spiritual purpose with you getting ready to go to sleep again? Now wake up a second, all right? Everybody has a tendency to add too many things to their life. Yes, we all do it. I think I did it last week. And you just keep piling more on, and you adding more things to our life, and it complicates our lives. And next thing you know, we have no room for a spiritual purpose. We have no time for a spiritual purpose. One guy wrote not too long ago that if the safety pin was invented today, that it would have a computer chip in it, a regulator, on and off switch, and require service every 6 months. Well, that's just about how complicated we make things. We just keep adding more and more to our life right here. But a purpose also helps us develop our potential. Somebody says, well, I can't do what someone else does, and I can't do what they do. You're not designed for that, but you are designed for your spiritual purpose. And you have one. And reaching our goals sometimes is not always as important as the growth that occurs in the journey. On getting there, sometimes we get confused and we don't know what's the importance is of having a spiritual goal or spiritual purpose in my life. It's the journey that's involved in that process. It adds value to your life. You understand God's plan and you see the value. It's not the trophy that we receive at the end of the race that's always that important, but all the training and development that got you to the point to where you could qualify for the trophy. You're a different person because of the journey you're going through. And what we receive by reaching our goals sometimes is not as important as the growth and what we've become because of that spiritual purpose that we had in our life. Every once in a while, I'm going through the TV channels, there's nothing, the commercials come on. Okay, you guys do know what, you wear out the button. And I'll go along and I run across the Smithsonian channel. One of my favorites, by the way. That's why I always kind of click over to it to see what's going on. And one time, they were describing, a group coming to Washington and going to the Smithsonian. And quickly, I go back in my memory bank. As a family, as a kid, our family went to Washington, D.C. and went to the museum. It's an amazing place. But on the TV channel, it was showing a special clip there on one section of the museum where John F. Kennedy is speaking, and he's challenging a nation. And he's saying to them, by the way, he's giving them a purpose. Watch this. That America was going to put a man on the moon. Now, this was back in 1961. Can I tell you ahead of time, the technology of putting a person on the moon was not even there yet? Not even close. And Charles Garfield said something really profound. He said the people involved in NASA, the Apollo program there, they were just ordinary people. They were men and women with average goals. They were men and women with average achievements in what they were doing. But once they got a new purpose, he noticed that a lot of the men and women were putting in extra hours. And a lot of the men and women had more determination. And so their accomplishments went higher and higher. And when he would ask different ones in the program, well, what's going on here? Why the extra time, the extra effort right here? Every single individual had the same answer. They said, we're going to put a man on the moon. They were consumed with a new purpose. To put an American on the moon, a purpose, by the way, will do that to you and I too. It'll help us develop our potential. It'll help us be all that we want to be. Oftentimes in our prayers, we'll say to God, I want to be more for you. I want to do more for you. I want to be more involved in your plan and what you're wanting to accomplish. It'll help us be more and everything we want to be for God if we have a spiritual purpose. And a purpose gives you power to live in the present. I want you to notice there's something about a purpose. Now, in case you guys haven't gotten it yet, this lesson is on you getting a spiritual purpose or a new one or a bigger one. That's in case you haven't got it yet. Okay, you got it. All right. Now, here's what a purpose will do. Sometimes it allows you and I to endure the storms and problems of all kind and pain that comes up. It allows us to walk through that process because we have a purpose beyond those things. But we have a reason. Viktor Frankl, by the way, the psychiatrist during World War II from Vienna, Austria. He was arrested by the Nazi troops and sent off to one of the two worst death camps that they had. The one that he was assigned to, by the way, had a checkout ratio that one person would survive that camp for every 20 who were slaughtered. But he, being a psychiatrist, watched people, which he wrote and told about later. But as he watched different individuals, he noticed something in that camp, that when men and women were stripped of their clothing and their dignity and all their possessions and their family and their friends, it was in that setting, when men and women were stripped of everything that they had going for them and what they possessed and what was important to them, he concluded that the people who eventually survived were the ones with a great, you got it, purpose for living. Now, did everybody live that have a great purpose? No, but the ones who survived are those who had something to return to after the war, something, a project that they wanted to start, that they want to complete when all of this was over, something that was extremely important to them, and that allowed them to survive the severe hardship. And in those death camps, some people would come to him and say to him, well, there's just nothing left to live for. And Frankl told them, well, you got it backwards. Life is expecting something from you. See, it's up to each individual to discover what it is you want to live for and how you want to live. You know, I learned a long time ago that problems and pain in life are inevitable. Okay. But misery is optional. It's one thing to have struggles, we all have them, but to be miserable all the time is just an option that you have to choose, because you see, it's not what happens to me, it's what happens in me. And when I have a meaning, when I have a spiritual purpose, that when trials come, and they will come, by the way, this ship's not going to sink. Because I have my Lord and I have the spiritual purpose for my life to keep me going. I like the definition of success that I ran into a long time ago, that success is a progressive realization of a meaningful and worthwhile goal. I just like that one. I mean, there are other definitions for success. But having a purpose allows us to evaluate. See, I believe that's the biggest difference between sports and work. Now, you think with me for a moment, guys. Some gals too, all right? You take your job and you go in another day. Maybe you have to punch a time clock. I did one time. And as a result of punching that time clock, you're given a certain job to perform, and you do that over and over and over sometimes. And a lot of times you have no idea whether you're achieving very much or not. You just do what it is you were told to do. You don't even know whether you're ahead or behind. Now, sports, now that's different. Because when you look at sports, you always know whether you're in the game or not. And there's a scoreboard and there's a time clock. And anytime you want to know what the score is, you can check it out and find out whether you're ahead or whether you're behind. And so it's different here. See, purposes have the ability not only to motivate us, but they also let us know where we're at. You know, am I still growing, or have I arrived? Do I need to set my purpose higher? Do I need to, what do I need to do right here? I remember when I was really, really young, my dad decided to put up a basketball goal at the end of our driveway. He purchased an old used utility pole. Those things were good, by the way. Planted that thing in the end of our driveway and was putting up the homemade backboard, because he went out and bought a rim and a basketball and the net, the whole 9 yards. And he's getting ready to put that up when he got called away at work. He said, "Sorry, boys, we'll get to that later." Okay. Now, as a young boy who was anxiously waiting, what? That backboard to be up there with the goal so I could play ball. I was smart, though. I said, I know what? I've got a ball. I can practice dribbling. I can do a little bit of passing and hit that pole. I did that for about 15, 20 minutes, and Pass to the pole, go pick up the ball. Pass to the pole, go pick up the ball. Dribble a little bit here. Better with my right hand than my left, but dribble a little bit there. Took the ball, went and put it in the garage and went in. See, there was nothing interesting without the goal. There was nothing to shoot for. There was nothing trying to accomplish here. You know, I even had a good pair of Red Ball Jet tennis shoes. My favorite at the time, by the way. Tom Boyard for Indiana University wore them. One of my heroes. First of all, he had a good first name, and well, you guys don't want to know. Okay. What I'm saying is, without that goal, without that purpose, you know, I know people, really, and you do too, who are going through life not knowing whether they're hitting or missing. They wonder why life seems to be so purposeless and so meaningless, and they don't know if they're useful, and they just wander from one day to the next day to the next day, and they ought to stop right now. Everyone should have a spiritual purpose. Okay, good. You guys are learning the signal. Every single Christian man and woman should have a spiritual purpose. Something you're trying to achieve, something that you're going for, something that you're growing toward. And it starts with you. And a lot of times when we talk about having a purpose or a goal, there's a tendency by making something really big and reaching out there, instead of stopping for a second and saying, I got to first of all look here. Don't look out until you take a moment to look within and start with yourself. And I want to give you 6 words to consider with me here this morning, and then I'm done. Can you handle 6 quick words? Okay. The first word is talent. And this is when you're asking yourself, you know, it's answering the question, what is it that I can do well? Now, don't say you have no talent. I don't buy that. Some of you have more talent than you even know. Go to the parable of talents and find out there was only one that had one, and he was a scaredy cat that buried it. You know, you have multiple talents. This room is loaded with talent. Waterford Church is amazing, bushel basket overflowing of talent. And so you ask what it is that I do well. And all of us have these talents, and there's something that you and I do well. And so when you search for your purpose, start right there. What is it that I do well? And the second thing I want you to consider is desire. And this is where we're answering the question, what do I want to do? See, I've learned that talent without desire accomplishes nothing. You have to have, you know, a heart to do it. And so ask the question regarding desire. The third word is results, and that is, what is it that I do well? You said, oh, wait a minute, Tom, wait a minute. Isn't 1 and 3 the same thing? No. Talent is what I can do well. Results are what I do well. They're different, okay? Because a lot of people have talent, but they choose not to use it. So it's not just talent, it's what do I do with the talent that God has given me. The next thing is recognition, and that is, what is it that others say I do well? In everyday conversation, those who know us pretty good, you come along and they see you and they recognize abilities in you that sometimes you don't spot. Or they'll ask your advice about something because they know that you've been through it or you know something about that. And so when they're asking you something or they recognize an ability in you, you got to ask yourself, well, what do people think I'm good at? Do they think I'm good at visitation? Do they think I'm good at teaching? What do people recognize that you're good at? And then also the word circumstances, and that is, what is it that I have opportunity to do? See, I'm convinced that some see something over there and they skip life to get over there. And the Bible tells us that whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might in Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse 10. So, recognize what is it you have an opportunity to do. And the final word is fulfillment. And that is, what is it that I enjoy doing? What after I've done it do I feel good about? I promise you that if you'll wrestle with those 6 words, that you'll find a spiritual purpose that's meaningful to you. You really will. You'll begin to find yourself and you'll find your purposes. We're coming up next week, by the way, on our annual meeting, and I think this is my 16th. Might be 17th. I got to go back and recount. I enjoy our annual meetings. You say, well, Tom, which part? The financial part? Well, no, that just helps me know what some of the goals are that the leadership has. But for all those years, I love to hear about what the church proposes to do down the road. What is it we're aiming for? What is it that we're going for? I love listening to, I really appreciate our elders and all the work they do and the willingness they have to serve us as a church. And I love the men and women who, because they've been asked, become deacons and serve certain areas, or they become Bible class teachers, or they're involved in the kitchen or whatever. I love reading about the goals on how that they're doing this, but they'd like to do this. But to do more means that it's going to take more manpower, more woman power. All the things that the church here at Waterford does, they can do at a greater level if we have the man and woman power. And so when deacons ask you to help them serve, or if a Bible class teacher says, can you help me in my Bible class? Because I want it to grow, and to grow means more work, and more work means that I'm going to have some help. And by the way, we need Bible class teacher helpers as much as we need Bible class teachers. And the greeter ministry, for it to become a bigger thing, or visitation to become a bigger thing. Every one of us sitting here wants Waterford to be great and to do everything that God wants it to do. And it'll be greater when men and women decide to have a spiritual purpose. When they'll volunteer some time, some effort, some preparation. I have loved the opportunity of teaching classes because I love the preparing as much as I do the sharing. But in the preparation, I get so excited about it, I can't wait to tell somebody about it. We need men and women who will pick up and help us be a greater congregation than we are now. There are still lost people that need to be reached, and they'll be reached by our efforts and our purposes. I don't even know where I left off. You and I see people every day that are just putting in time. I see them and you do. They're just putting in time, and they act like they're just waiting to die. We've got to have a purpose, a vision that's bigger than ourselves. And I got to be honest with you, there's very few things in my life that I would die for. And I've thought about this, whether you have or not. I'd die for my faith, because I believe if it's worth living for, it's worth dying for. I would die for my wife, of course. And I would die for the freedom that you and I enjoy, because I'd rather die than be under bondage or oppression by other people. I've grown up in America, and I love the freedoms that we enjoy, and so does the rest of the world. There are people all over this planet who wish they had half the freedoms that you and I enjoy every single day, but they don't have them. I don't know what you'd be willing to die for, but I can tell you this. Don't live your life like a sailboat that's just being tossed back and forth by every wave that comes your direction. Get an anchor. Get a spiritual purpose that you'll live for. And Albert Pine said one time, he said, what we've done for ourselves alone dies with us, but what we've done for and with others remains and is immortal. I thought about his words real close, and I thought, you see, if I bring others along with me, that when I die, it lives on in them, and in those that they include, and those that they include. I can honestly tell you the Sturgeon family's been around quite a while. But it's been around quite a while because of what we believe in and what we call ourselves has been passed on from one generation to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation. And hopefully the one that's coming up now with all those grandkids that my brothers have. Our purpose needs to be bigger than ourselves. We need to see its importance. We need to see, we ought to be living for something that's so much bigger than what we are, that outlives us, and not only include other people. Our ultimate purpose in life ought to be just as big as you and I can make it right here. And I'm sure you know that I believe in the sovereignty of God, and as I obey him and as I walk in his planned purpose for me, I'm alive. But I might die. I might only be alive until I'm 69. I may be alive longer than that. I don't know. I think I'll be alive as long as I'm obedient to God and I live long enough to fulfill the purposes that he has for me. And when those purposes are fulfilled, everything will be handed off to someone else. You and I have the equipment. God has given us our talents. He's given us our personalities. And he's given us our purpose. Would you bow with me in a word of prayer? Our Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for the person that you've made each one of us to be. Father, I want to especially pray for the mothers who are here who think that this lesson this morning is probably for highly talented and motivated people in your church. Father, help them to see that maybe their purpose might be sitting on their lap right now or right next to them, or might go shopping with them this week. Father, I also pray for the fathers who may mistake this lesson into thinking their only purpose is to go to work and bring home a paycheck. Father, help them see the awesome purpose of being a spiritual leader in their homes, making spiritual decisions. Father, thank you for the tremendous purpose of teaching others of your wonderful love. May we all be faithful to that task. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. If you're here this morning and you're subject to the invitation, if we can assist you in putting Christ on in baptism and giving your life to him, or if we can pray for you in any way, we hope that you'll come while we stand as a church and sing this song.